At this point, every information portal is saturated with mindfulness content. But this show is a unique, unusual, curious take on mindfulness. Some of what you hear will be completely new to you. Let's dive in and take a look at the nature of the aware mind. I invite you to deepen your awareness so that you may be liberated and inspired. I'm Sarah Vallely, professional coach. I help people overcome anxiety, heal from past trauma, improve their relationships, and maintain better work-life balance. I'm so excited about our show today. I have two amazing guests with me that I am about to introduce. But before I do that, I want to explain the levels of working with me. So on one level, people do individual coaching with me. And so that's one level. Another level above that is doing the personal coaching with me and also participating in my online course, TSD mindfulness course. And then the next level up from that is doing the private coaching with me, participating in the online course, and also going through my certification program, either becoming a certified mindfulness teacher, certified mindfulness coach, or a certified mindfulness healer. And so I have Brian and Allie with me today, and Brian works with me in private coaching and also has participated in my online course. And Allie does personal coaching with me, has participated in my online course, and also went through my certification program and is a certified TSD mindfulness teacher. The TSD Mindfulness Virtual Meditation Center, we hold a monthly online meditation the third Saturday of each month. And this month, on February 17th, Saturday morning, Allie will be teaching. So I'm really excited about that. Welcome to the show, Allie. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks so much, Sarah. It's great to be here.
Thanks, Sarah. Great to be here.
So glad you're here. Our topic today is feeling fear and insecurity in a healthy way. I often refer to this as the fear work and the insecurity work. And this work involves sitting with the fear, sitting with the insecurity in this healthy way that we're going to talk about, which in turn allows you to liberate yourself from the discomfort. And this does not mean that you'll never feel the discomfort that comes from the fear or the discomfort that comes from the insecurity again, but it means that it doesn't affect you in the same way. It doesn't have as much power over you. So in the mindfulness community, we don't shy away from discomfort. And what we do is separate the discomfort from that thinking that, oh, this discomfort means that I'm getting old. This discomfort means that there's something wrong with me. This discomfort means that something bad is going to happen. Instead, we just sit with the discomfort in a neutral way. This is based on a mindfulness concept that what you resist grows more powerful. When we don't resist it and we welcome it and we sit with it, we do have a new relationship with it that feels better. So the invitation is to sit with the fear or the insecurity. And it's not really as easy as that. I'm just going to sit with this. It often is better if you go through some type of training or supported in some way to know how to sit with that insecurity and sit with that fear in a way that is healing. And that's why I have Allie and Brian here today to share their experience with this process so you, the listeners, can do this on your own. And I also wanted to mention the difference between fear and insecurity. And insecurity is the parts that make up the fear. So there's these different components that make up the fear. An example of a fear would be a fear of feeling alone. Example of an insecurity might be, I'm feeling insecure about my ability to interact with people in social situations. So slight difference. When we do the fear work, we realize how normal and innocent it is to have fear, have insecurity. And I'd love to hear what this realization has been like for the two of you.
What I really have liked about this whole process is, like you said, the normalization of fear, insecurity, and especially the biologic component. I'm a scientist, so that resonates a lot with me. the greatest relief is to kind of see there is a normal biologic response associated with fear and insecurity. That's just by itself is a huge kind of relief.
Meaning that when we are in fear, our nervous systems can get triggered, and that's okay, that's normal, and we can do things to soothe it.
Yes. And just by seeing that instead of being in it is in itself a little bit of a release.
I agree. I think that component has been huge and just kind of connecting with what I'm actually feeling in my body. And that normalization of it has been also clarifying for me because the society often says like show no fear. And for me, that had some confusion to like feel no fear. And so I was really not allowing myself to feel any fear. And in that idea of what you were just talking about and what you resist persists, like I had avoided so much fear. There was really just a lot there. And it was taking over my mind, my worries, my insecurities. What I noticed happen if I tried to sit with it, my body would instinctually pull me away. Like, don't go sit there. That's not good. But I had to kind of force myself to do it. And once I did, it's amazing what happens. It gets smaller. And somehow it feels not as scary when you actually notice it and sit with it and witness it.
Yeah, we're human beings and we are actually designed to feel fear. So to live in this place where, oh, I shouldn't feel fear, fear is bad, you're denying that we're built to feel this. And the reason that we are built to feel this is because it kept us alive, in centuries past. It's part of our human existence. And so when we accept that it's normal and okay, it can really shift the energy around it. When we're going to sit with the fear or we are going to sit with the insecurity, the trick to this process is separating the shame from the insecurity and separating the worry from the fear. This is because the shame is what makes the feeling, the insecurity unhealthy. And it's the worry that makes experiencing the emotion of fear unhealthy. But the insecurity and the fear on their own is healthy and it's actually healing. And when I use the word shame, I'll explain that because that can mean a lot of different things to different people. Sometimes hear that word, they think it's associated with religion or something of that nature. But when I use the word shame, I simply mean any thoughts we have that make us feel not good enough. This might happen when we compare ourselves to others or feel down about something that we did or feel down about something that we didn't do. Allie and Brian, could you share what, from your personal experience, that would help the listeners understand how they can separate worry from fear?
For me, it was becoming aware of what was happening in my body. Worries are in my head, and fear is in my belly. So often, if I can just start there and say, where is this happening from? I can get a clue as to what it is that's happening. If it's in my head, what I've noticed is just, we talk about the spin of thoughts. And so what's been really helpful to me is to kind of distinguish between the two and to notice if it is my head is that process of noting. In noting, you just describe what your thoughts are. So often I'm rehearsing what I'm going to do about something. So that's worry. And so if I can notice that I'm rehearsing, then I can go, okay, what's under that? Am I afraid of something? And that curiosity really helps me distinguish from there too. And I always really like the idea of a worry is something that I'm likely not going to do anything about. I'm just going to sit and spin on it.
If you think about all the worrying that we do, has it helped? Has the worry
Right.
helped in some way?
Exactly. Worry has never helped me.
Right. So I like that. So you've identified that your worry hasn't really caused you to do an action that's been helpful.
I like to think of it worry is a reaction or response to fear. Not being able to make that distinction before, I think I was trapped in worry without able to access and sit with the fear. last night worrying about the podcast. I use now those worries as indicators or notifications or something about what might be underneath, what fear is going on. I like the way Ali described it. I hadn't thought of that way, but it really makes sense of going from your thoughts into your body. And the other thing that kind of is difficult for someone who's kind of new at this is the unseen shame factor. And like your body doesn't want to go there, but you don't even know why your body doesn't want to go there. It's almost like shame is an invisible force, and without looking for it, you don't see it pulling the strings. And anyway, so it's been very useful to notice and be curious about those knots that come up. Like, is this worry or is this fear or what's underlying? So I'd say a big benefit to anybody who's trying this is that first step of being curious about what's going on. What's the difference between these two? Already that takes you to a whole different place. Fly fishing, at least, they don't have the barb on the hook. It still works, but it doesn't like catch or isn't harmful for the fish. It feels like, yes, these things are still happening and these negative emotions are still coming up, but it doesn't have that barb in there that feels like it's impossible to remove the hook.
I love that analogy. That's perfect. And I love that you both touched on the curiosity piece, that next time you have a worry thought, instead of getting wrapped up and going down that rabbit hole, instead you could take a pause and be curious and ask yourself, I wonder what the fear is underlying that worry. And worry is definitely an unhealthy response to fear. So that's a really good concept to understand. But there are other responses to fear that are more healthy. And we'll go into some of those tools, but they include validating, noticing body sensations, self-compassion, noting, like Ali had mentioned. And Ali and Brian, can you share your personal experience of separating shame and insecurity? So we just talked about the experience of separating worry from fear. And the other piece here is separating shame from insecurity. So yeah, what is that like for you? Or what is the difference between the two for you?
The big thing for me is the separation between what I am and what's happening. Feels like shame is more feeling or telling yourself that you are not good enough, you are weak, you are flawed, versus insecurity. Like you mentioned, Sarah, I'm not sure I'll be comfortable in this situation at a party or at a meeting or something like that. When you can move from the shame into the insecurity, it feels comfortable kind of being uncomfortable. So that's something to sit with.
It's like the insecurity is different from the shame, because the shame is this story that we're telling ourselves about how we're not good enough. But the insecurity is simply an emotion. It's just an emotional experience that comes up. And sometimes a good way to separate it is to say, I'm having this insecurity about being in certain social situations, but it doesn't mean I'm bad at starting conversations. It doesn't mean that people don't like me. That's really separating the shame piece.
The difference between what's actually going on and what you're making up. And so it's easier to sit with what's actually going on and working with that versus something that you just totally made up.
I think for me, before I started with these coaching sessions and the classes and things, I didn't even realize that that's what was going on, that I was making up this story, that wasn't true. I fully believed the shame. I think it is interesting to separate them, because the shame can feel so much bigger than what is actually going on. I mean, I just think shame feels terrible. It feels like you really can't do anything about it. There's no empowerment in shame. Separating them really does give you an opportunity to heal some of that shame, because you might still have the insecurities, and that's natural and normal, but the shame doesn't have to come along with it.
Just speaking for someone who's relatively new to this and relatively new to sharing emotions and talking about these things, is at first one of the big hurdles is the kind of vocabulary. We're talking about shame, we're talking about fears, we're talking about maybe inner child. And for people that aren't used to this, it can be, I'm not going to go there. But if you can have a little patience and kind of see what's behind these words, they aren't, like Sarah was saying, being interpreted in so many different ways. If you can kind of let go of the label a little bit, see what she's talking about here, it's easier to move forward.
I have insecurities around making mistakes. And the shame cycle of that is that people won't like me, that I will destroy all of my relationships because I make a mistake. I see this spectrum where insecurity is in the middle. I think I've learned this from you. It's just that insecurity can kind of be in the middle where it is this helpful emotion that you can experience and work with. The other side of the spectrum is shame, which just feels like you can't do anything with it and you're not worthy of anything else. And then on the other side is compassion. So if we went to the other side from people won't like me, the compassion aspect is I am loved, regardless if I make mistakes. But that is a huge concept for me, one I'm definitely still working on.
Yeah, I think what's been really helpful for you and a lot of other people that do this work is to accept yourself, love yourself, even though it makes you uncomfortable when you think about possibly making a mistake. That's just part of who you are. It doesn't mean that people aren't going to like you. It doesn't mean that you're not as worthy as somebody else. That has so much to do with that acceptance of that this is something that makes me feel uncomfortable. We are going to take a 30-second break. You have asked for it, and it is here, a free monthly TSD Mindfulness online meditation group. Join us every third Saturday at 10 a.m. New York time, which is 3 p.m. London time. You will receive instruction, participate in discussion, and experience a guided meditation. Register at T as in tame, S as in soothe, D as in dwell, mind as in mindfulness.org. And we're back.
I always want to do things right, and I always want to be good at what I'm doing. So I'm insecure about trying new things. I think the underlying shame is that I'm not good enough. It's really hard to sit or do anything with that feeling. I am not good enough. To sit with that is like not uncomfortable at all, like Ali was saying. So if you can move into kind of the insecurity part, I feel unsure about my ability to do this. When I don't know the answer to something, I'm uncomfortable. And then I like the last part too. Like, I think it's a critical part, the self-compassion. Again, one of these words that for new people, you just have to kind of get over it. But it really is that release where you feel like you put down a big, heavy backpack or something like that. I accept that I don't always have the answers. I accept that sometimes I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think through this process, Brian, you've gotten to know yourself a lot better, having that connection with yourself.
Definitely. I think like Ali was saying, tour is just running on autopilot and you don't even know what's
And I think you get to the point where you can start talking to that shame voice and being like, no, that is not true.
Yeah.
I am worthy.
Yeah.
I am loved.
Yeah.
Like it shuts it down so much, just differently than I ever could before.
I think what's helpful is which you're doing, is to identify that this feeling of insecurity is an emotion. Like this is it's a feeling. It's a feeling of discomfort. It's a feeling of unease, feeling unsure, and just sitting with that on an emotional level versus the shame is a belief. I believe this. I believe this is true about myself is very different than this emotional experience that comes in and then leaves. So there are 4 truths about insecurity. One is insecurity feels uncomfortable. It doesn't necessarily feel good. Insecurity is temporary. This healthy version of this experience, it comes and it goes. And insecurity is an emotion that's usually rooted in trauma. usually rooted in something that happened in childhood or maybe after that. And insecurity is not necessarily an indicator of reality. Keep in mind those four truths about insecurity. And we have insecurities around social situations. We have financial insecurities. We have intellectual insecurities about how smart we are. We have physical insecurities about how strong we are or about the way we look. We have love insecurities about how loved we are, how lovable we are, just to name a few of the kinds of insecurities we have. Some examples of some core fears are fear of feeling an emotion, fear of feeling physically uncomfortable, fear of people perceiving us in a certain way would be some core fears. The idea here is to experience the fear and experience this insecurity in a healthy way. And there's certain tools that we've been using in sessions and in the course to help with that. So I'd love to hear about some of your experiences, whether it's working on a specific tool sheet or an exercise or something that is helpful.
For me, it has been a regular meditation practice because we're talking about so many of these things that come out of thoughts, whether it's shame that's coming out of the thoughts or it's the worry that's coming out of the thoughts. For me, to be really able to catch those cycles is in stillness. It's kind of the basic skills of single pointed focus. And what that means is just giving your mind something to focus on, your body, the sounds around you. As I was describing earlier, is really just being in my body, getting present with myself has been huge. What am I feeling? I don't know that I was ever really taught that as a child to notice what are the emotions? What am I avoiding? What's going on there? And I already mentioned noting, but that has been huge in my thinking cycles is just being able to say, okay, this is worry that's happening. I'm reliving my past right now. I'm not in the present. You have several worksheets that are really helpful in terms of separating worry and fear. And a lot of them for me are just really specific about being consciously aware of whatever's processing in my body and my mind versus just being unconscious and letting whatever is happening just continue to happen.
I think this is interesting because this fear work and this insecurity work is emotional work, right? We're really healing emotionally. But to do that work, it really involves an awareness of the thinking, right? Because that thinking is going to be the indicator and the pathway to that emotional experience. And it sounds like, Allie, in your meditations, you're using the single point of focus, which is we're focusing on our breath or body sensations. And at the same time, we're also noticing what are those thoughts that are coming in. Oh, I really need to get the laundry done. Oh, I really need to do better with my business. Oh, I really need to do all these things, which when we notice those thoughts, which a lot of times, especially if we don't do mindfulness, we don't even know they're happening, but they are affecting us. They're affecting our body. They're affecting our behaviors. But when we notice those thoughts, then we can look at them with curiosity and see, wow, those thoughts are really rooted in some of these deep emotional experiences of whether it's insecurity or fear. And sometimes it's something even completely different, grief, feeling neglected. Being aware of what those thoughts are can be the pathway. Thank you, Allie.
I'm trying to develop more of a daily kind of meditation or checking in because I think it's super helpful to do that kind of in the daylight or in waking hours because at night when you wake up and there's like a pit in your stomach, you're not exactly sure what's going on. Before I started doing all this work, I know I would just toss and turn for hours and hours. But with the tools, one, doesn't seem like that barb is there. It's still very uncomfortable and you're still hooked, but you have the tools to be curious. I don't, unfortunately or fortunately, see those thoughts right away. where I can quickly identify, oh, you're thinking this. That's why you have this pit in your stomach. And yeah, I have to kind of work backwards and go, okay, what's going on? Is this worry? Is this fear? What kind of fear is it? Is it fear of, something at work? Is it fear of emotions? Or tools like validating fear are good ways to start to peel the onion. This is natural. This is biologic, that your body and mind are kind of working together to protect you from dangerous things. But like, is this a dangerous thing? Kind of the best one, surrendering to fear. Sometimes you try everything in the book, you get out the whole notebook and you go through everything and nothing is working. Just surrender. I mean, you're bigger than me. There is kind of a release with that too.
So that surrendering to your fear exercise, so the listeners know, is you imagine that the fear takes up geographical space. How much space does it take up? For some people, it's like half the size of the country. Like it's like this huge amount of geographical space. And then it's just surrendering, saying, I'm not going to fight against you anymore. I'm not going to try to control you. I'm not going to try to overpower you anymore. And the idea behind that is that it is in the fight, it is in the trying to overcome the fear that gives the fear so much power.
The moments that I've been brave enough to surrender have been some of the most beautiful moments of healing. It is an incredible space of vulnerability, but your fears really are real. It's not that you have to be stronger or that you have to be better and you shouldn't feel them. If you were just a better person, you wouldn't feel them. But fears can be very real. And so that surrender process just helps me go, okay, I actually am really afraid, and that's okay.
Yeah, and you realize you can survive through it, and in the end, you'll be okay. You had mentioned, Allie and Brian, about incorporating this into your meditation practice, which is amazing. That's such a great way to do this type of work. And another great way, and I know you both do this as well, is taking those pauses during the day. So, for example, I have a lot of worries about work. So it'll be during the work day, and I'll notice that I'll be worrying that not enough people will show up to an event, or that a certain client isn't really appreciating the work that we're doing together. Why did I pick this line of work? This is like, I feel like I'm going against the flow of the rest of the country, that kind of thing. I take those pauses during the day because I notice, oh, I'm in worry mode. Take a pause, and that pause is so key. That step of being able to just take a break, because it's so ingrained in us from children to just keep going, get the next thing done. There isn't time to take a break. We need to get this done. Really training yourself and allowing yourself to take that break, even a 1 minute break, to notice the worry and say, what's really going on here, can just completely transform the rest of your day. For me, I take that break and I notice the worry thinking, and I have a fear of failure. That's one of my core fears. And so I've been doing the work of sitting with that fear of failure, and then I just remind myself it's okay. This is that fear of failure coming up. I've been doing this work long enough to know that it doesn't really mean anything. It's just something that I acquired as a child, and it shows up, and I can just take a breath and be with this and just remind myself that everything is going to be okay. And I would advise not to just tell yourself, stop worrying, stop thinking shame thoughts. Like, that's not going to work. Right.
True.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why the tools are so important, because the tools are there as a replacement for that. So you need to do something instead. You might validate yourself, like Brian was talking about. You might do a little bit of surrendering. You might give yourself some compassion.
In our society, right, we're trained to show no weakness, show no fear, be independent, be strong. And that doesn't leave a lot of room for a compassion component. that says, it's okay, you're human, it's going to be all right. I've found that self-compassion piece to be a skill that I really needed to work on. It wasn't something that came naturally to me. The words like, it's understandable that you feel this way. That wasn't part of my role modeling or my experience, but it is amazing when you get to be there for yourself. It feels so good. You don't have to be dependent on someone else to be there for you, even. But when you show up for yourself, it's amazing. What happens is that strength does come, that resilience does come. You just get to feel more like yourself. And that's a beautiful thing.
Having spent many, many years trying to make all these things go away. Different types of meditation, different types of books, different types of podcasts, trying to make them go away, and that not working. For anyone out there who's been trying for a long, long time, self-compassion really helps me with the fact that these things don't go away. My favorite that you have, Sarah, is this: even though I'm having feelings of insecurity, or I'm having feelings of not being smart enough, even though I'm still worthy, there's something core, undeniable about that. Self-compassion is like your built-in teacher. So you don't have to call Sarah or Allie all the time. Hey, this is going on. This is going on. That self-compassion is like, it's understandable. And you're saying this to yourself, it's understandable. And even though you're feeling this way, you're still worthy. You're still loved. You're still safe.
Yeah. And I think for both of you, the self-compassion has helped you quiet that unhelpful thinking. But what I think it also has helped both of you with is soothing your nervous system. In the show notes, I will put links to a few of these different tools that we've been mentioning. One is a list of fears, so you can identify what some of your core fears are. Another is a sheet with about 4 different fear exercises. You can just take about 5 minutes and do these exercises to help you sit with your fears. And the last one is an insecurity tool, which helps you identify what your insecurities could be, and then offers some self-compassion to help counteract that shame that might get instigated by some of those insecurities. So Brian and Allie, you two have been doing amazing work with me in the sessions and in the classes. I so appreciate you coming on the show to share your stories. I know it's going to touch so many of the listeners. So appreciate it. Allie, you are a certified TSD mindfulness teacher, and I'd love to give you an opportunity to share about your business and how people can get a hold of you and the topic of the mindfulness class that will be on Saturday, the 17th of February.
My business name is A Light Insight, and that's the same website, alightinsight.com. I teach a class on Thursdays in the TSD format. It's free and you can just pop in. It's 15 minutes. So you can check that on my website. And on the 17th, we will be looking at how some of these instinctual responses that we have can be soothed through some of these tools. When that alarm sounds in your system, what can you do to help release and calm? I'm also an energy healer. I help people get unstuck and feel more empowered to live the life they choose.
And all these offerings that Allie has are online. So anybody anywhere can sign up for her programs. Thanks so much for being on the show. The Aware Mind podcast is a TSD mindfulness production. Please check out our show notes for upcoming events and links to additional resources. Please visit our website at tsdmind.org. That is T as in tame, S as in soothe, D as in dwell, mind as in mindfulness.org. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at TSD_mindfulness.